What if everything you've ever been taught about why bullies attack is completely backwards?
Right, because we always assume it's one specific thing.
Exactly. We are constantly told they pick on the weak. The quiet kid in the back of the classroom,
Yeah.
or the supposedly underperforming employee.
Yeah, that's the standard cultural narrative.
But the actual data shows something entirely different. They are essentially casing the neighborhood, and they're specifically targeting the house with the most valuables.
It's a complete paradigm shift, honestly. We've built these entire cultural narratives around the idea that, well, being bullied means there is something fundamentally wrong with you.
Like a deficiency in the victim.
Exactly. When the reality is, it is a direct reaction to the victim's inherent value.
And that is exactly where we are starting today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are taking on a topic that touches almost everyone, yet is just profoundly misunderstood.
So misunderstood.
All right. Whether you listening right now or tuning in because you're trying to process something you went through years ago, or maybe you're dealing with a highly toxic workplace right this very minute.
Or perhaps you're trying to figure out how to help your own child who is struggling with this.
Exactly. If any of that applies to you, you are in the right place.
It's a conversation that really requires stripping away a lot of anecdotal assumptions, We have to look at the hard science.
The sociology, the psychology, and most importantly, the neurology. Like, what actually happens when human beings systematically tear each other down?
Which is pretty heavy, but so necessary.
To do that, we're looking at a massive, comprehensive stack of resources. Research data and training excerpts from a specialized anti-bullying platform called FG Own Your Power.
And what makes these sources so unique is the perspective of the founders.
Yes, Jason Langley and Jennifer Langley.
Right. Jason brings this highly clinical perspective as a registered nurse with a Bachelor of Science in nursing, and Jennifer has a Master of Arts in Human Resources.
So you have this fascinating collision of frontline healthcare and corporate systemic knowledge.
Which is absolutely vital, because if you only look at the psychological trauma, well, you miss the systemic environment that allowed the trauma to occur in the first place.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, and if you only look at HR policies, you miss the profound biological damage happening inside the individual. You really need both lenses.
So our mission for this deep dive is to completely dismantle the myth that bullying is just some sort of rite of passage.
Yeah, that narrative needs to go.
We are tearing down the idea that it's a playground issue kids just eventually outgrow, or that it's just a, tough management style in the corporate world.
Because it's neither of those things.
Not at all. We're going to uncover the hard data on how bullying literally reshapes the physical structure of the human brain. We're going to decode the real psychology of why bullies actually attack.
And then, importantly, we are mapping out the actionable, highly tech-forward tools available to reclaim your power.
But, to understand the cure, we really have to grasp the shocking scale of the disease. We have to look at the systemic data first.
And the most objective way to measure a systemic failure is to look at the financial toll.
Right.
The sources cite data from the Workplace Bullying Institute, the CDC, and the American Journal of Public Health.
And the numbers are just unbelievable.
They are. When you aggregate the economic impact of bullying in the U.S., it costs an estimated $14.3 billion every single year.
I really want that number to land for you, the listener. $14.3 billion.
It's massive.
That is the GDP of a small country, just simply vaporized because people are actively choosing cruelty.
And the breakdown of that number completely shatters the illusion that this is just a childhood problem.
Yes, let's get into the breakdown.
Well, $8.8 billion of that total is lost in workplace productivity and turnover alone.
I have to push pause right here. $8.8 billion in the workplace.
Yeah, just in the workplace.
Because we culturally treat bullying like something you age out of at high school graduation. You get your diploma, and magically, bullying is just over.
Right, like adults are somehow immune to it.
Exactly.
Oh.
But this data shows that adult bullying is literally bankrupting companies. How does a company lose that much capital just from bad behavior?
It's a cascading failure. When a company loses an employee to toxic workplace behavior, they aren't just losing a body in a chair.
Right.
They are paying for severance packages, potential legal settlements, and recruitment for a replacement. Then there's the whole retraining phase.
Which takes months.
Exactly. But the hidden, most insidious cost is the sheer drop in productivity from the remaining team.
Because everyone else is stressed out too.
Yes, a team operating under an authoritarian or abusive manager is operating in a state of constant fear. They aren't innovating, they are just trying to survive the day without drawing fire.
So that $8.8 billion is really a direct metric of organizational paralysis.
That's a great way to phrase it.
Then you look at the educational sector. $3.5 billion is spent annually on school interventions, counseling, and security measures.
Just think about what that money could be doing otherwise.
Right. It's not going to advanced science labs or arts programs or paying teachers a living wage. It is capital being entirely consumed by crisis management and threat mitigation.
And completing that $14.3 billion figure is the $2 billion absorbed by the healthcare system.
This is a cost of treating mental health crises, right?
Yes. Anxiety, depression, and trauma directly stemming from bullying incidents.
But you know, the statistic that I found most haunting in the entire stack of research wasn't the macro number. It was the micro number.
The lifetime cost per child.
Exactly. If you track a single child who has been chronically bullied, the economic impact on their individual life ranges from $85,000 to $140,000.
To understand why that figure is so incredibly high, you really have to look at the trajectory of a human life.
Walk me through that. How does it add up to $140,000?
Well, that deficit accounts for reduced educational attainment, first and foremost. If a school environment is deeply hostile, the child's brain cannot absorb academic information.
So they drop out or they underperform.
Right. And that lack of education directly impacts their lifetime earning potential.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, the trauma deeply impacts their ability to self-advocate, negotiate for raises, or even take leadership risks later in their adult careers.
Wow. They are essentially paying a lifetime tax on being victimized.
A tax on being victimized, that is a brutal but very accurate reality.
But the data also shows that this tax does not hit everyone equally, does it?
Not at all.
The deep dive sources include 2022 data from the National Center for Education Statistics and GLSEN, and the demographic disparities are just stark.
Very stark.
According to the data, 31% of Native American students face bullying, 27% of multiracial students, and 25% of Black students.
And when you transition to gender and identity demographics, the numbers spike even higher.
They completely skyrocket. 52% of LGBTQ+ students experience bullying.
Which is more than half.
Yeah. And an unbelievable 59% of transgender students are targeted. Non-binary students face rates of 32%.
And we also have to look at students with disabilities.
Right. They are targeted at a rate of 33% compared to 19% for their peers without disabilities.
Also, the sources highlight that cyberbullying peaks right in that highly vulnerable 12 to 14 age range.
Right. And it disproportionately affects girls at 38% compared to 26% for boys.
So if you synthesize these demographics, a very clear, very disturbing biological and sociological mechanism is revealed.
What is that?
Bullying is not random. It is not an accident of proximity. Bullying is a calculated tool of marginalization.
Okay, unpack that for me. Because tool of marginalization sounds very academic. How does that actually play out in a middle school hallway or, say, a corporate Slack channel?
It means the bully is actively weaponizing broader societal prejudices on a micro level. A bully is, at their core, an opportunist.
They look for the easiest target.
Exactly. They systematically target individuals who sit outside traditional power structures.
Whether that's racial minorities, gender minorities, or individuals with physical or neurological disabilities.
Right. The bully intuitively seeks out targets they perceive as having less social capital to fight back. They rely on the assumption that the system, the teachers, the HR department, society at large, will care less about protecting these specific individuals.
Which means that the economic costs we just talked about, that loss of billions of dollars, isn't just a loss of generic workforce productivity.
No, it's not.
It is a massive systemic suppression of human potential from our most vulnerable communities.
Precisely. It is an intentional siloing of diverse voices.
Yes, the economic costs are staggering. The emotional costs are devastating. But the sources, particularly the data from the Global Bullying Intelligence Center, point to an even darker extreme.
Yes.
We have to talk about what happens when this systemic failure, this unresolved trauma, boils over into the physical world.
This is a critical pivot in our understanding. This is where we have to stop looking at bullying as just a behavioral issue and start looking at it as a matter of urgent public safety.
Right. The research provided pulls data straight from the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center and the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit.
And they track what they call the bullying to violence pipeline.
And they've documented a terrifyingly predictable pathway from chronic victimization to violent behavior. It follows 4 distinct stages.
Let's break those down.
The first stage is chronic victimization. That's the relentless daily abuse.
The baseline trauma.
Stage 2 is social isolation, where the victim is entirely cut off from peers and support networks.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Then stage 3 is the crisis point, and stage 4 is violent ideation.
The statistics tied to those stages are just sobering. The Secret Service found that 71% of school attackers were chronically bullied.
Let me say that again, because that's huge. Nearly 3/4 of school attackers were victims of chronic, relentless bullying.
Right, and 87% of them felt severely persecuted by others.
And the FBI corroborates this, right?
Yes, the FBI found that 78% of attackers had a documented, known history of being bullied.
Now, I want to be incredibly clear here, and I know you do too. This is absolutely not about excusing violent behavior.
Oh, absolutely not.
The responsibility for an act of violence rests entirely and solely on the perpetrator who pulls the trigger or throws the punch.
Yeah,
Nobody gets a pass.
I completely agree. The responsibility is absolute. However, if our goal is actual prevention, we have to understand the mechanics of despair.
Right, we have to look at the root causes.
We have to understand what is happening in the brain during that progression, from stage 2, social isolation, to stage 3, the crisis point.
I always picture it like a pressure cooker. If you have a pot on a stove and it's generating all this steam, that steam being the daily stress, humiliation, and trauma of the bullying.
That's a really good analogy.
Normally, human beings have pressure valves. We have friends we can vent to, we have a safe home environment, or we have teachers or managers who step in and advocate for us.
Right, the valves release the steam safely.
But if you seal off every single valve, if you socially isolate someone while continuing to victimize them, the crisis point isn't an anomaly, it's just physics. The explosion is inevitable.
That analogy captures the neurological reality perfectly. When the system fails to protect a victim, the victim's brain stops perceiving the bullying as an isolated incident.
What do you mean?
Instead, it begins to perceive the entire environment as completely hostile. They feel like they have no safe harbor anywhere.
Oh, wow.
This shifts their entire neurological framework into pure survival mode. The brain essentially decides, well, I am under lethal threat, no one is coming to save me, so I must eliminate the threat myself.
It is a horrific distortion of a very natural, ancient survival instinct. And the tragedy is that it is preventable. The data from SAMHSA, this Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, notes that early intervention programs can reduce violent incidents by up to 50%.
Because early intervention opens a pressure valve.
Right.
It breaks the social isolation. Even one person stepping in signals to the victim's brain that the environment is not entirely hostile and that they are not alone.
It interrupts the progression before it ever reaches the crisis point.
Precisely.
But, to intervene early and to truly dismantle this pipeline, we have to look at the genesis of the abuse. We need to look directly at the perpetrator.
The bully themselves.
Yes. Who are these people and why are they spending their energy doing this?
This is where the materials from the FG Own Your Power platform require us to unlearn almost everything popular culture has taught us about the dynamic between a bully and a target.
Yes, this completely flipped the script for me. The foundational psychological rule they state is this: bullying is never about the target's flaws.
Never.
It is always a confession of the bully's lack.
It's a profound shift in perspective. The abuse is simply a projection of internal machinery.
The sources outlined 5 specific profiles of a bully. And as I read through these, I was instantly putting faces to them from my own past workplaces and schools.
I think everyone does.
Let's dig into these. The first profile is the insecure bully. This is the classic individual who tears you down specifically to feel tall.
Right. Their entire sense of self-worth is operating on a zero-sum game.
If I win, you have to lose.
Exactly. If you are succeeding, if you are joyful, if you are confident, their brain interprets your positive state as a direct threat to their own fragile ego.
Because they lack the internal tools to elevate themselves through their own merit.
So their only available strategy is to diminish you.
Then there is the second profile, the learned bully.
This one is rooted in generational trauma.
How so?
Well, these individuals bully because, in their home environment, aggression is the only recognized currency of power. They are simply repeating a cycle of abuse.
So they might not even realize what they're doing is wrong.
In many cases, they don't consciously recognize the cruelty of their actions. They've been taught since birth that the world is strictly divided into predators and prey, and they are making the calculated decision not to be the prey.
Wow. The third profile is one I think everyone recognizes from middle school, but I see it constantly in corporate environments too. The social climber.
The social climber uses exclusion, rumors, and strategic gossip as currency to buy social status.
So your humiliation pays for their popularity.
Precisely. They are highly attuned to social hierarchies and will ruthlessly sacrifice someone slightly lower on the ladder to secure or elevate their own position.
So it's not even personal.
Usually not. They don't necessarily hate the target. The target is just a stepping stone.
Then we have the fourth profile, the bored bully. And honestly, reading the description of this one gave me chills.
It's chilling because this profile often exhibits a profound lack of empathy, bordering on antisocial or sociopathic traits in extreme manifestations.
So they just do it for fun.
For them, cruelty isn't about status or insecurity, it is simply entertainment. They have learned that eliciting a painful, emotional reaction from another human being is stimulating. To them, it's just a game.
That is terrifying. And finally, the fifth profile, the authoritarian bully. The sources note this is incredibly common in workplaces and within family dynamics.
This is the micromanager, the controlling spouse.
Right.
They require absolute dominance over their environment to feel internally secure. They use intimidation, moving goalposts, impossible standards, and emotional abuse to ensure that everyone around them remains constantly off balance.
Because if you're off balance, you can't challenge them.
Exactly. They need their targets to be entirely dependent on their approval. It's a deeply ingrained pathology of control.
I hear that, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
In a high-stakes corporate environment, where is the line between an authoritarian bully and just a really demanding boss who expects excellence?
That is a crucial distinction. A demanding boss sets high standards, provides the tools to meet those standards, and celebrates when you achieve them.
So their focus is the work.
Right. The goal is the success of the project. An authoritarian bully, on the other hand, uses shifting standards as a weapon. They will change the rules after the work is done specifically so they can criticize you.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Yeah. Their goal is not the success of the project. Their goal is to remind you that they have the power to destroy you. It's about maintaining a dynamic of subjugation.
That makes perfect sense. So those are the 5 profiles. But here is the most fascinating part of the psychological breakdown. Who do they target?
Right. This is where the myth really falls apart.
The pervasive myth is that bullies...
The bully is constantly wearing heavy, restrictive psychological armor to hide their deep-seated inadequacy. When they encounter someone who is authentically themselves, someone who walks into a room and shines brightly without needing any armor at all, it is excruciatingly triggering for the bully.
Because it highlights what they lack.
Exactly. It holds up a mirror to everything they're failing to be.
It's like a thief. A burglar doesn't spend time casing an empty, dilapidated house. They target the house with the valuables.
That's a perfect analogy.
The bully isn't attacking your weakness. They are trying to steal your light. They are attacking your strengths because your strengths expose their deficits.
But, and this is the vital caveat, the bully is fundamentally a coward.
Right.
So they calculate the risk. They target people who have those threatening, valuable traits, but who they also perceive as being unlikely to retaliate.
Like who?
They specifically look for deep empathy. Because an empathetic person's first instinct is usually to try and understand the bully's pain rather than destroy them.
Oh, wow. That's so manipulative.
It is. They look for people who are naturally conflict avoidant or highly agreeable.
So it's that specific intersection. High value combined with a perceived low defense.
Exactly. And understanding this machinery is the first step in stripping the bully of their power over the victim's self-worth.
Because it's not about the victim.
Right. When a target finally realizes that the abuse was never a reflection of their own flaws, but rather a targeted attack on their virtues, the psychological spell breaks. The shame begins to dissipate.
That reframing is incredibly liberating.
It really is.
But, and this is where we have to dive into the hard medical science, even when you know logically that it's not your fault, the repeated attacks take a devastating physical toll.
Yes, you can't just logic your way out of it.
Right. You can't just think your way out of biological response. How does this targeted abuse actually rewire the human body?
This is where the clinical medical background of Jason Langley, the platform's founder, really comes into focus.
Because we aren't just talking about hurt feelings or having a bad day.
No, we are talking about literal structural brain damage.
The sources reference a landmark study by King's College London that tracked bullying victims for an astounding 40 years.
4 decades of data.
And they found that the biological and psychological effects last well into middle age. Victims are 4 times more likely to develop severe anxiety disorders.
And they are 2 to 9 times more likely to consider suicide or engage in self-harm.
They also face massive increases in clinical depression, social anxiety, and eating disorders.
What's terrifying is why those mental health outcomes occur. It's not just a lingering sad memory. It's an architectural change in the brain caused by chronic stress.
I really need you to break this down for me.
Yeah, sure.
Because we culturally understand PTSD in the context of surviving a car crash or a soldier returning from a combat zone, a moment of intense physical, mortal terror.
Right, an acute event.
But how does a harsh word in a corporate meeting or being systematically excluded from group chats at school literally shrink a part of your brain?
To understand that, we have to look at evolutionary biology and how the human nervous system developed.
Okay, take me back.
For early humans living in tribes, being socially excluded or ostracized meant certain death. You simply could not survive the elements or predators alone.
So being kicked out of the tribe was a death sentence.
Exactly. So the human brain evolved to treat a social threat with the exact same level of physiological alarm as a physical predator.
Wait, really?
Yes. Your brain's threat detection center does not distinguish between a tiger jumping out of the bushes and a manager humiliating you in front of your peers. To your autonomic nervous system, both are lethal threats.
So social death equals physical death to the brain.
On a neurochemical level, yes. The response is identical. So when you are chronically bullied, your brain's fire alarm, the amygdala, gets stuck in the on position.
So you're just constantly in panic mode.
You enter a constant state of hyperarousal. This activates the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which floods your entire system with the stress hormone cortisol.
And cortisol is bad.
Well, a burst of cortisol is great if you need a short sprint to escape a tiger. But when cortisol bathes your brain constantly, day after day, month after month, it becomes neurotoxic.
And what does that toxicity actually do to the physical tissue of the brain?
It physically shrinks the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain's center for memory consolidation and learning.
It shrinks it.
The cortisol literally causes the neurons there to atrophy. This is why trauma victims often have highly fragmented memories or struggle to concentrate on basic tasks.
That explains so much.
Simultaneously, this toxic stress weakens the prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of your brain sitting right behind your forehead that regulates emotions and makes complex decisions.
So you are left with a hyperactive fear center, a damaged memory center, and an impaired rational center.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm.
That biological explanation perfectly maps onto the 10 signs of bullying-induced PTSD provided in the materials. If you understand the brain chemistry, these symptoms aren't just emotional overreactions.
No, they are biological inevitabilities.
Let's look at how the biology drives the symptoms.
Okay.
For instance, the materials list flashbacks and intrusive memories as a primary sign. A specific tone of voice or a laugh in a hallway triggers a full-body panic attack.
Right. That is the hyperactive amygdala misinterpreting a current safe stimulus as the past trauma. The weakened prefrontal cortex isn't strong enough to step in and say, hey, it's just a coworker laughing at a joke. We are safe.
Then there is hypervigilance. The victim is constantly scanning a room for threats.
Which is exhausting.
And avoidance, like skipping reunions, quitting jobs, avoiding entire cities.
Which shrinks the victim's world drastically, leading right back to that social isolation stage we discussed in the pipeline to violence.
Other signs include emotional numbness, feeling entirely disconnected from loved ones.
Because the brain is just trying to protect itself from feeling anything.
Right, and an exaggerated startle response. Someone says your name unexpectedly, and your heart rate spikes to 140.
That's the amygdala again, stuck in overdrive.
Sleep disturbances and chronic nightmares. Negative self-beliefs, where the victim internalizes the abuse and thinks, well, I deserve to be treated this way.
Which is just heartbreaking.
Difficulty trusting others, constantly assuming hidden motives, unexplained anger or irritability.
Because you're constantly on edge.
And finally, severe physical symptoms like chronic migraines, gastrointestinal issues, and chronic fatigue.
The body keeps the score. When the mind cannot process the trauma because the hippocampus is compromised, the body manifests the stress physically.
And we really need to highlight a distinction the sources make here between traditional PTSD and CPTSD.
Yes, complex PTSD.
What is the difference?
Traditional PTSD often stems from a single, discrete traumatic event. A car crash, a natural disaster.
Okay, an isolated incident.
Right, but CPTSD results from prolonged, repeated, chronic trauma where the victim feels physically or emotionally trapped.
Like being stuck in a toxic job or school.
Exactly. This is the hallmark of workplace bullying, chronic school bullying, or domestic emotional abuse.
Which explains the long-term effects.
This is why victims struggle with deep-seated imposter syndrome and chronic people-pleasing years after they have escaped the toxic environment.
Because they had to people pleases just to survive.
Yes. Their brain learned that appeasing the abuser, making themselves small, was the absolute only way to survive. The trauma becomes woven into their personality.
Okay, that sounds utterly terrifying.
Hmm.
The idea that your brain has been structurally altered, that your neurons have atrophied because of someone else's cruelty.
It is scary.
If I'm listening to this and recognizing these symptoms in myself, I'm probably feeling a lot of despair right now.
I can imagine.
But there's a massive biological silver lining mentioned in the sources. One word: neuroplasticity.
Yes, this is where the hope lies.
The brain is not static.
No, it can heal. It can rewire itself. The damage to the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex is not permanent if it is actively treated.
So how do we treat it? What are the practical tools to rewire the brain?
This brings us to the solutions.
The FG Own Your Power platform doesn't just present the grim reality of the problem. They bring a literal arsenal of solutions. And they organize this around 7 pillars of empowerment and a massive digital toolkit.
They approach healing through multiple modalities, which is essential.
Right.
Because trauma affects the mind, the body, and the spirit. The recovery protocol really has to engage all three.
Let's start with the mind. The materials discuss therapies like EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing.
Which is incredibly effective for trauma.
It helps the brain reprocess traumatic memories so they no longer trigger the amygdala.
Exactly. It breaks that short circuit.
They also emphasize CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to consciously reframe the negative thought patterns.
And for the body, they recommend somatic therapy and intentional movement.
Oh, I thought this was interesting. The research notes that physical exercise actually helps metabolize and flush the excess cortisol out of the system.
It literally clears the toxicity from your bloodstream.
And for millions of people, there is a deeply spiritual component to recovery that cannot be ignored.
Absolutely. The platform explicitly includes faith-based recovery tools.
Yes, they provide curated scripture focusing on courage, guided prayers, and a community prayer wall.
They recognize that for many survivors, finding meaning, rebuilding faith, and connecting with spiritual strength is the primary pathway to rebuilding that sense of safety that the bully tried to destroy.
But beyond the therapeutic and spiritual modalities, what makes this platform so revolutionary is its integration of technology.
I am so glad you brought this up.
Because looking at this list of over 40 interactive tools, my jaw was on the floor.
It's next level.
The platform is essentially a cybersecurity suite, but built for your emotional boundaries.
It acts like a cognitive prosthetic.
A cognitive prosthetic. I love that term, but explain how an AI acts as a prosthetic for your brain.
Think back to the neurobiology we just discussed. When a victim receives a manipulative text message from a toxic boss or a narcissistic ex, their amygdala flares up instantly.
Right, the panic sets in.
They are flooded with fear, doubt, and cortisol. Their prefrontal cortex, the logical brain, is taken offline.
So they can't think straight.
Exactly. They start gaslighting themselves, thinking, am I overreacting? Is this my fault?
Which is what the abuser wants.
Right. So the AI tools on this platform step in to do the logical processing that the victim's brain is temporarily unable to do.
That is brilliant. Let's look at what these tools actually are. They have an AI message analyzer that detects manipulation tactics in text messages or emails.
Yes.
They have a gaslighting decoder to help you mathematically recognize when someone is distorting reality.
Which is so validating for the victim.
They even have an apology analyzer. I have to admit, when I first read Apology Analyzer, I was highly skeptical.
Why is that?
How can an algorithm spot a fake apology better than a human being?
Because the algorithm doesn't have an amygdala. It isn't emotionally invested in the relationship.
That makes sense.
A human being reading an apology from an abuser desperately wants to believe it's real, so they ignore the subtle shifting of blame.
But the AI doesn't care.
Right. The AI analyzes the linguistics. It looks for qualifiers. It flags phrases like, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," or "I apologize, but you made me angry."
Oh, the classic non-apologies.
Exactly. It objectively highlights the manipulation so the victim can see it in black and white. It validates their reality and cuts through the cognitive dissonance instantly.
They also include an evidence vault with PDF export capabilities, which is crucial for building a case for HR or legal action.
You aren't just relying on memory, which we know can be fragmented by trauma.
You are building an immutable ledger of the abuse. And all of these tools are organized into their complete anti-bullying training, which is built on 7 pillars of empowerment.
This is the roadmap from victim to empowered survivor.
Pillar 1 is stand-up. This involves using proven, rigid scripts, specifically the Dear Man framework from dialectical behavior therapy.
The Dear Man framework is incredibly powerful for trauma survivors.
Break down the mechanics of it for me, because telling a victim to just stand up for yourself is usually terrible advice.
It is terrible advice because a victim in a trauma response can't just wing a confrontation. Their logical brain is offline.
Right. So what does Dear Man do?
Dear Man provides a strict formula. It stands for describe the situation factually, express your feelings using I statements, assert what you need clearly, reinforce why it benefits both parties, stay mindful and focused on the current topic, appear confident in your posture, and negotiate an outcome.
That is extremely structured.
By forcing the victim to follow this rigid step-by-step formula, it forces the brain to use the prefrontal cortex instead of relying on the emotional amygdala. You are essentially hijacking your own nervous system to remain calm.
Pillar 2 is set boundaries. The platform provides ready-to-use scripts so you can say no without the overwhelming guilt that usually accompanies it.
Which takes practice.
Pillar 3 is reclaim your voice, focusing on overcoming the deep-seated fear of confrontation. Pillar 4 is build inner strength through daily practices and mindset shifts.
Notice the overarching theme of these first 4 pillars. They shift the individual from a state of passive endurance to a state of active boundary setting.
This is how you leverage neuroplasticity, isn't it?
Every single time you use a script to set a boundary, you are laying down new neural pathways of safety and empowerment. You are literally rebuilding the physical tissue of your brain.
That is so empowering. Pillar 5 is respond with strength, which focuses on conflict resolution and de-escalation tactics when the bully pushes back against your new boundaries.
Because they always push back at first.
Pillar 6 is heal and rebuild, providing a structured 30-day recovery roadmap. And Pillar 7 is protect and advocate, which expands the focus outward, providing specialized resources for parents to protect their children and for educators to secure their classrooms.
And that outward focus, the community aspect, is the ultimate defense. We really have to discuss the bystander intervention data provided in the sources.
Yes, the platform includes interactive bystander training based on the 5D framework: direct, distract, delegate, delay, and document.
A great system.
But there's a statistic here that I frankly struggled to believe at first glance. The research shows that 57% of bullying incidents stop within 10 seconds when a single bystander intervenes.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. I'm looking at this deep-seated pathology of the authoritarian or the social climber bully, and I'm asking, how can a pathology that deep be shattered by a coworker just speaking up for 10 seconds? What is actually happening in the room?
It goes back to the bully's risk assessment. Remember, the bully is fundamentally insecure and relies entirely on social consensus to feel powerful.
So they need the room to agree with them.
They need the silent complicity of the room. Silence tells them, the tribe agrees with me, I am safe to continue.
But if someone speaks up,
When a bystander steps in, even if it's just using the distract method, like asking the target a random question about a spreadsheet to break the tension, it instantly shatters that social consensus.
so the spell is broken.
The bully's brain registers that they have lost control of the room. Their risk of facing consequences spikes exponentially, so they retreat.
10 seconds to change the trajectory of someone's life. 10 seconds to protect their hippocampus from cortisol toxicity. That is incredible.
It completely shifts the burden of defense.
What do you mean?
It moves the burden off the targeted individual, who is already neurologically compromised and under immense stress, and places it onto the community, which has the emotional bandwidth to act.
So as we wrap up this deep dive today, let's take a step back and look at the massive terrain we've covered.
We covered a lot of ground.
We've seen that bullying isn't just kids being kids or a demanding corporate culture. It is a $14.3 billion systemic epidemic that weaponizes societal marginalization.
It affects every level of society.
We've traced the horrifying, predictable pipeline from chronic victimization directly to physical violence. We've looked inside the insecure, desperate, armor-clad mind of the bully.
And we demystified why they attack.
We've explored the literal cellular brain damage caused by toxic words and chronic stress.
But most importantly, we've seen the science of neuroplasticity.
Exactly. We know the damage is reversible. Through intentional boundaries, therapeutic modalities, community intervention, and brilliant tech-forward tools, you can rewire your brain and reclaim your power.
The trauma is a deeply painful chapter, but it does not have to be a life sentence. The architecture of the brain can be rebuilt.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on the psychology we uncovered today.
It's an important reframe.
We learned that bullies do not target weak people. They specifically case the neighborhood for the house with the valuables. They target people with highly threatening traits.
Profound empathy, fierce authenticity, and unique, brilliant talent.
If that is true, then surviving that bullying means you have successfully protected your greatest assets under relentless fire. You defended the vault.
The bully tried to steal your light and failed.
So what if the very traits that made you a target are the exact same traits that'll make you an incredibly powerful, transformative leader once you finish your healing journey?
That's the real victory.
What if the profound empathy the bully tried to crush is the exact superpower you need to change your workplace, your family, or the world?
The trauma was the crucible, but the strength and the brilliance were always yours.
When we started this deep dive, we talked about how the landscape of trauma can feel incredibly murky and overwhelming. But looking at the science, the psychology, and the robust tools developed by platforms like FD Own Your Power, that muddy water becomes clear.
The path is laid out for you.
The injury might be invisible, but the healing process is real. It's mapped out, and it is entirely within your reach. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a great conversation.
We highly encourage you to explore the FG Own Your Power resources to understand the psychology of bullying and trauma recovery. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you have the tools to own your power.